All right, so at this point, it may officially be over. I'm not actually sure the status, but some of you know about the Asbury Outpouring. The Great Revival, Craig, or as it's sometimes called, the Great Revival. Now, I don't have any official position on whether I think that was legitimately a powerful move of God or not. But what I thought it would be instructive, okay, I'm not skeptical of it. It looks very similar to church services I've had. But my estimation from the outside looking in, okay, and I'm not there in person, but I would expect if it were really, really, truly powerful move of God, I'd expect a lot more miracle claims than we're getting from this Asbury outpouring. I'm not saying it's not the real deal. I'm just saying it's not the great revival, the great American revival that's going to wake up the entire nation and shake the nation to its core. I don't think that that's what we're looking at with the Asbury outpouring. But what I thought the Asbury outpouring might be valuable is for clarifying some of the problems and the pitfalls with the argument from religious experience. I think it'd be really instructive to go over. Now, if you are an atheist listening to this, okay, it's not a trick question, but obviously the people who are going and attending the Asbury outpouring believe almost to a man, almost 100% of the people at that religious meeting believe that you could actually tangibly experience the presence of God in that room. Now, here's a trick question, atheist. Can you? And here's the only legitimate answer. I know you think there's more than one answer, but there's only one legitimate answer. That's why I said a trick question. I don't know why you haven't been there, unless you went there. Even if you went there, though, that's part of what I'm going to go over. That's the only legitimate answer. I don't know. Remember, and this is people get confused about this. Nothing to be confused about. Okay? Saying that you go into that room and you can tangibly experience the presence of God in that building at that worship service, that is not a faith claim. People get confused about that. That's an experiential claim. So let's analyze the difference. And let's also analyze why you can't answer it other than I don't know. So, as I've said before, qualia is content specific. When I tell you a qualia experience, I am not making a faith claim. That is an experiential claim. I am telling you the direct evidence of my senses and what it produces in me. And as I've said 1,000 times, if I've said it once, I am completely rationally justified to believe in that which I clearly perceive. Full stop. Now, that doesn't mean I'm right. It just means I am rationally justified to believe it. It means a lot of reasonable people, given the same parameters of experience, would come to similar conclusions. Now, that's obvious. Drag 100 of you to my church, and you'd be all over the map in terms of agnostics, atheists, Muslims, Hindus, whatever. Drag 100 of you to my church, 15 of you would go, Craig is right. It does seem like God is present here. The Christian God. 15, maybe that's high, maybe that's low. But a certain segment. And they wouldn't be the crazy ones. The crazy ones, Craig. No, not the crazy ones. Yeah, the sickos, the weirdos. No, not the sickos and the weirdos. Everyday people. Couple of atheists in that crowd. So here's how a way you can think of it. As I've said in the past, a lot of atheists say, well, I've had a religious experience. I was in a church. You don't have to tell me, Craig. Once upon a time, I was in a church, 10 years ago, and it was really stupid and boring, and the pastor lied through his teeth all the time. Okay, that was a type of religious experience. That wasn't the same thing. I cannot stress this enough. Qualia is content specific. So the way I've said it in the past, if I tell you, Led Zeppelin is the most powerful experience you could ever have seeing them live, you don't get to turn around and say, you're wrong, Craig. I saw this high school band perform Whole Lotta Love, and it wasn't very good. Okay, it's not the same thing. If I say Schindler's List is one of the most powerful experiences you will ever have in a movie, you don't get to turn around and say, you're wrong, Craig. I saw Mall Cop. Mall Cop? Are you kidding? Yeah, that's a movie too. And it wasn't very powerful at all. Therefore, Schindler's List wasn't powerful. That's the analogy. I know it doesn't sound like that's the analogy, but that's the analogy. Why are people making that analogy? Because they are mistaking a faith claim with an experiential claim. So if I tell you, and to clarify, let's use a movie that probably almost everyone here has seen Schindler's List, right? If you haven't seen it, go check it out. Why? It is, in fact, a very powerful movie. Very, very high quality film. I think I'd put it in my top 10. I think it's fantastic. Very powerful. Probably not everybody, probably almost nobody listening to me has seen The Seven Samurai, correct? Maybe Dry Apologist. Dry Apologist is a bit of a movie, but Dry Apologist, you might have seen it, right? Maybe John Buck. I can't think of anybody else. Dave Rollins is possible. That's it. I can't think of anybody else who's seen The Seven Samurai. So I say The Seven Samurai is one of the most powerful movies you will ever see. It's a great, fantastic film, right? Okay? And I say to you, did you see it? And you go, no. Then I do a follow-up question. It's not a trick question. And I say, how was it? You go, what answer could you possibly say? I don't know, Craig. I just told you I didn't see it. The same thing holds for the Asbury Outpouring. If I say to you, even you the atheist, I know you don't see it this way, but that's because you presupposed presuppositions. It's why I realized I had to get to presuppositions. Because the reason why the atheist thinks they don't have to tangibly experience it is because in their worldview, in their paradigm of reality, the supernatural does not occur. Ergo, it is not possible to go to anything akin to an Asbury outpouring and feel anything like the actual presence of God. Why? There is no such thing. Right? So if I say to an atheist, you don't know if you can experience the presence of God at the Asbury outpouring. Why? Because you haven't gone. To them, they don't think they have to go. Pine Creek Doug already thinks he knows what's present there. Nothing to be experienced. It's all emotionalism, Craig. There's going to be some emotionalism there. That's a given. And from my just gauging it from the outside, I would say it doesn't look like this awesomely powerful, great end times revival, because I think there'd be a lot more, just a lot more stuff going on that was really hard to explain, even for the atheists. They'd be a little bit, nervous about talking about it and nervous about going. Why? Because they kind of know. They kind of go, oh, okay, wow, that seems like there really is something going on there. That's how I think it will happen when it finally happens. If and when there is such a thing as a great end times revival. By the way, Megavolt, you're the only person I ever talked about that with. So it's not like some big ode that it hasn't happened. I mean, I've got 500 videos, dude. I don't know, some little impish little freak. So if and when there is any such thing as a great revival, I would expect a lot of atheists to approach it with trepidation. Why? Because they'll know. They'll be like, oh my gosh. They won't necessarily believe it's God, but they won't be able to explain it at all. And there'll be a lot of phenomena associated with it that no one will be able to explain, except me, the theist. I'll be able to explain it. Yeah, just move of God. Just power of God. It's just like I said. It's like I've been saying the whole time. It's the power of God. What do you want? Now, there's more to the story because it's even more complicated than that. So if you were an atheist, okay, first let's deal with experiential claim. If one of your atheist friends went to the Asbury outpouring tomorrow, okay, and he came back and he said, Craig is right. I stayed in that service for 3 hours. I worshiped along with them. I started singing, Holy Spirit, come, fill your church with joy overflowing. And God, if I didn't feel some really powerful, peaceful feeling that sounds almost exactly like Craig is talking about, God, if I didn't feel transformed from within, I accepted Jesus Christ. I'm now saved, guys. Hallelujah. They're all like, ew. Oh, great. Ew. And then you've lost all your friends. And I'll be like, praise God. Can I go? Yeah, right. There go your atheist friends. No, they are not going to. He would not be telling you a faith claim. I know it sounds like he is, but it isn't. That's part of atheist, the way you've been trying to frame this the whole time. That is an experiential claim. He went to the place, and what the people were reporting to have experienced, he experienced. Experiential claim. No faith involved. Just like if he believed me about Seven Samurai, same guy, goes and watches Seven Samurai, go, this Craig Reed is on a roll. Seven Samurai is freaking awesome. By the way, it is freaking awesome. Dry apologist, check it out. I swear to God, it's one of the best movies ever made. I swear to God, it's really entertaining, really fun. It's a big influence. Akira Kurosawa was a big influence on Steven Spielberg. Big influence. Huge. One might even say, Steven Spielberg, not ripped him off, but, huge influence. And then that guy goes, wow, Craig is right. Seven Samurai is a killer movie. That's an experiential claim. Same deal. It's the same deal. And what I'm telling you, I'm completely rationally justified to believe in that which I clearly perceive. I am literally telling you my experience, the sense, what my senses evidence to me is the case. And why I realized that I had to move to Presup is because both Matt Dillahunty and Pine Creek fallaciously started arguing that I have no right, literally no right to believe in the evidence of my senses, even though that's how they believe in everything, and that's how everybody evidences the world. Your senses are there to what? To evidence the world as it actually occurs. That's what your senses are there for. So when your senses indicate something to you, even if it's something that atheists don't believe, even if it's something that atheists don't believe, you are completely rationally justified to believe it yourself, even if it's implausible. Okay? Now, they both had two fallacious arguments. Pine Creek's was a little bit higher end, to tell you the God's honest truth. Matt Dillahunty, in general, is the much better debater, much, more accomplished atheist, but Pine Creek's argument is a little bit more sensical. His argument is, so, is everybody clear? Let's go back to the building. If you are an atheist, okay, and I'm not saying that Asbury Outpouring is the real deal, so, there are other reasons also why you might not accept the quality experience in the form in which it comes. And those are usually highly personal. So before I go to Pine Creek Doug, let me just say a word about that. I was watching Digital Gnosis' channel, Nathan's channel, and he had two agnostics on there. I think one was an agnostic, one was an atheist, and one of them had actually gone to the Asbury Outpouring. Now, did he think there was the presence of God? No. But I also realized something hearing them talk. And even there's Christians who couldn't receive the Asbury Outpouring. Why? Because qualia is also very culturally specific. It's not just content specific, okay? If you're a metalhead and I drag you to and I say to you, Beethoven is so awesome, dude. He's really metal. You gotta trust me. Ninth Symphony is killer. It's fantastic music. You will like it just as much as Van Halen. I'm telling him the truth, actually. I promise. I'm telling him the truth. But he might not believe me and he might not accept it. Why? Because to him, metal is everything. And classical music, it's so boring. Now, that's not true of every metalhead. There's a lot of metalheads who took classical guitar and are great at it, so they understand that they like Beethoven or Bach, and they really like that music. But there's a lot of metalheads who won't receive it. Why? Because it comes in a form they're not used to. That's why there's a lot of Christians. There's a big discussion in the Christian community. You can go flip on 50 different videos all over the place in terms of whether they think Asbury Outpouring is legit or not. Why? Because religious experiences are highly personal. And generally, they only come in cultural forms that people are able to receive them in. So there are Christians who will go there and say, it's not, even if they think there is a presence, they'll go, it's not for me. Why? It's all these hippies falling along the floor. This ain't the real thing. Because it's not what they think of when they think of holiness. Holiness is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. Take my life. That's one of those Christian worship songs. I bet you they sang it there. I bet you $1,000 they sang it there. So qualia is content specific, but is also culturally specific. You can't drag a cultural musician, a classical musician to a heavy metal show. Sometimes there are people who you can't. Okay, I'm one of those type of people. I go anywhere, hang out with anybody. I could hang out with the guys, talk about Van Halen one night, be drinking at the bar, yeah, Van Halen's awesome, and mean it, and then have another conversation where I go with the girl to watch Beethoven's Ninth and really thoroughly enjoy it. That's just how I'm wired. Not everybody is wired that way. A lot of people can only accept things in a form that they are used to experiencing it in. Now, a good example along these lines, there's a guy in our culture, Benny Hinn, who's automatically, you bring up his name, people automatically ridicule him. Maybe justifiably so. I don't know. He's probably said some controversial stuff that earned some of the contempt. Some of it's probably, just anti-Christian, whatever. I don't legitimately know. But I know this for a fact, okay? Part of the reason why he gets ridiculed is the white suit and the big hair, and he's got this big piano, and there's this choir behind him. Okay, there's a reason for all of that. In America, that doesn't play well. In America, that immediately sets up people's skeptic meter and spidey sense, and they're like, fraud, televangelist, this guy's coming for my money. But there's a reason why he dresses like that and looks like that. Why? Because he goes to Africa and he goes to India, and that's what they think of when they think of a religious experience. That's the only form they can receive it in. And he goes to places all over the world. And the Asbury Outpouring is nothing compared to, so he's had a meeting in Dubai. You go look this up it's there on YouTube tonight. 7 million, I think, was the total. 7 million people, I'm pretty sure. It was either 3 million or 7 million. Either way, it was a multitude of millions of people. Can you imagine that? That's way more than the Asbury outpouring. People don't even know that that happened. You know, it's not commented on. And a lot of people in America automatically think of them as frauds. Some of that is packaging. Packaging usually, you know, sometimes if you're a skeptic, be careful of what you're skeptical of. Are you skeptical of the substance, or are you just talking about the form? The style, because style is usually a big thing. A lot of Christians are rejecting Asbury outpouring out of hand. Why? It's not coming in a style that they're accustomed to. They don't think of Christianity in those terms. They think of it in far more spiritual and formal terms. Quote unquote, spiritual in air brackets. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying this is how people are wired. And I noticed that because one guy on Nathan's channel was talking about it in those terms, like, this is what I do when I think of spiritual experiences. And he's talking about listening to like chant-like music late at night. And I'm like, of course, you know, that's what most people are thinking of. They aren't thinking of spiritual experiences in terms of, you know, even contemporary dress, playing music that's something akin to, now I wouldn't call it rock and roll. I mean, that's a stretch, but something akin to the Eagles, let's say. You take it easy, take it easy. I won't say it underrated band. Why? Because a lot of people like them, you know. They're all right, they're fine. Whatever, a couple songs I like. So you understand. Now, the problem with the atheist is the atheist thinks that they are rationally justified, which they are not. This is irrational, is my point. I get you don't believe in God, but you have no idea, if you're an honest seeker of the truth, there's only one way you could decide for yourself if there's actually a presence of God to be experienced at that Asbury outpouring. Megavolt, this applies to you too, you evil little creep. Go there in person and stay there for 5 hours. And try and make it so that you experience it. That's the key. Why? Because you can reject an experience. You know, qualia is also very emotionally specific. I'll give you a perfect example. Okay? How you prepare yourself for a qualia experience makes a really big difference on what you are able to receive. And no, that isn't automatically manipulation, guys. It's not. It's not. Then all plays are manipulative, all concerts are manipulative, all movies are manipulative. It's not. Then every time there's music in a movie, it's manipulative. It's not. It's cluing you in. You should be scared right now. Why? Because someone's probably hiding behind the door. Okay, it's cluing you in. But it's also not necessarily manipulative. It is part of experiencing something through your senses. It's part and parcel of the course. Yes, people can abuse it. I understand that. But let's take an example so everyone understands what I'm talking about. Let's go back to Schindler's List. A very powerful movie. Very powerful movie. I legitimately would put it on my top 10. The liquidation of the ghetto scene is like one of the most powerful sequences, top 20 sequences in all film. Really killer. Okay, at the time, my girlfriend was Jewish. I went to see that movie in the theater. My girlfriend was Jewish. Not just Jewish, though. Really, really heavily involved. Culturally Jewish. Like Jewish was a big part of her identity. She literally was an editor for the Jewish Forward, for the Jewish newspaper, The Forward, which is like a Jewish daily or weekly in New York City. Yeah, pretty highbrow. She was like a Ivy League, you know, pretty smart girl. Okay, but Jewish was a big part of her cultural identity. Okay, so when I saw the movie, I thought it was powerful. She was freaking shattered, guys. She was shattered. Literally could not talk to her for 2 hours after the movie. Promise. Because of things that were very specific to being Jewish. Like there was a sequence where they pan past the shoes being counted. Does everyone remember the movie? Where they pan past and the shoes are being counted. She's like, do you realize in Hebrew school, I saw pictures of those shoes being counted all the time. Like she was freaking out. And could not be brought back into reality for at least 2 hours. Why? Because the experience was so powerful given her cultural context. So not only is qualia content specific, okay, remember, Mall Cop and Schindler's List are not the same thing. If you saw Mall Cop, you didn't see Schindler's List, right? Different movies, everyone understands. And if you didn't see Seven Samurai and I ask you how was it, you can't answer. You go, I don't know. So if I ask you the Asbury outpouring, you can't, and I say, can you experience the presence of God there? I understand, atheists, you want to answer differently. There's only one legitimate answer. I don't know. Well, I haven't tried. That's it. That's the only legitimate answer. That's why Pine Creek Doug and Matt Dillahunty were both making the same pretzel logic arguments to me, not recognizing that they were pretzel logic. Why? Because they reject the premise that I can experience God through my senses altogether. So if I tell them I literally had a sense experience that evidences to me the case that God exists, they reject the entire premise. So they start asking me questions that are literally pretzel logic, but don't seem like pretzel logic to them. Why? Because in their paradigm of reality, the supernatural does not occur. But they're pretzel logic questions. Pine Creek's argument is there's a Hindu somewhere, and he has an experience of Shiva, and you don't believe him. Okay, maybe not. Therefore, you don't believe in the reality of your own experiences. That's the logic of it. Matt's was worse, to tell you the God's honest truth. Matt asked me, how do you evidence to yourself? How do you demonstrate to yourself that your senses work? Why? Hello, I'm having a conversation with you right now, doofus. Right now, right here, in plain English. My senses are working just fine. And I tried to give an analogy so he'd understand it. He misunderstood the analogy. Then I'd say, you misunderstood the analogy. Oh, I sincerely doubt that. Oh. Yeah, no, you did. Because I said, you, me, Pine Creek Doug, and it was somewhat amusing because Pine Creek, Matt Dillon doesn't like you very much. Right? He kicked you out of the thought experiment. I swear to God. I put Pine Creek Doug in the thought experiment. Matt Dillon, he kicked him out. I did. I said, you, me, Pine Creek Doug, and Aaron Ra. The idea is atheists and a Christian are all in the room. Our senses function identical to each other. He didn't get the idea of what I was saying. And he misrepresented a lot. He played games with me just as badly as Pine Creek Doug, actually. Not worse, but just as bad. Just as bad. Said things that, I would say something like, my wife has had identical experience. You don't know that. Blah, blah, blah. Ridiculous. Tried to star man and misrepresent instead of just understand the obvious. Okay? Now, how much evidence it is for you, the atheist, that's up to you to decide, but it should constitute some. Some. Why? My senses function identical to yours. Correct? Correct. And I have experiences every single solitary day of my life that evidence the case to me, sense experiences, not faith claims, where I put on worship music and I quite literally feels like I'm experiencing the presence of God in person. And it's 100% real to me. To ask me how I know is illogical. Why? Because the sense experience is that vivid. That's what I was trying to explain. If I'm swimming in a pool and you say, Craig, you're on the phone with you and you say, Craig, what are you doing while you're talking? You say, I'm swimming in a pool. Would you ask me how I know? No. You might not believe I'm swimming in a pool and you might not believe I'm legitimately experiencing the presence of God, but that doesn't mean I'm not telling you the truth about the evidence of my senses. Okay? I understand that you reject the entire premise, but you still have to be logical in how you hear it. If I say to you, I put on worship music and I 100% feel like the presence of God is in the room with me every single solitary time within 5 minutes, okay? The only logical answer for you, the atheist, is, if I say, if you tried it too, what do you think you'd experience? You'd say, I don't know. That's it. It's all you are allowed to say. Why? Because you can't just reject flat out, especially if I'm trying to evidence to you that God exists. You can't just reject the entire idea that God exists. Therefore, I reject the evidence based on that ground. Do you get it now? This is why I realized I had to move to precept. Why? Because they come in with a really formally resolved presupposition. The supernatural does not occur. There's no way he's experiencing God. Therefore, the evidence he's presenting doesn't count. That's why they kept trying to tell me I'm not allowed to experience my evidence. They literally, both of them told me I'm not allowed to perceive the evidence of my senses. Why? Because they don't believe the conclusion I come to. So Matt Dillahunty, if you're listening to this, I know you're not. Think of it this way. Pine Creek, same thing. You're both looking across the street at the house next door. If you see somebody breaking into the window, are you 100% rationally justified to start going, wait, looks like someone's breaking into my neighbor's house? Yes. Why? Because that's what your senses are evidencing to you. And now, might you be wrong? If you're drunk, you're high, you only got 2 hours sleep, you might be wrong. If your senses are functioning properly, you're going to be wrong? No, probably not. There's a good reason for you to call the police. And you'd probably explain it to the police. There may be qualifiers. It looks like someone is breaking into the house. I don't know who it is, but someone is climbing in through the window. Now let's say your wife or your girlfriend walked into the room with you. This is what I'm trying to explain. There's no way out of this, atheist. What? This is the evidence of my senses. You don't get to reject it flat out. How much evidence it is for you, I don't know. That's up for you to decide. But I'm a 100% saint, and no, it's not debatable. Don't say it's debatable. It's debatable. No, it's not. Shut up. No, it's not. And my senses function identical to yours. So when I tell you this is my sense experience, that's what I'm telling you. It's not a faith claim. When you see the neighbor breaking into someone breaking into your neighbor's house, is that a faith claim? No, you're telling you what your eyes see. What your eyes see. Okay? That's what your eyes are there for, to evidence the world to you. You don't test your eyes in that situation. You go with what your senses perceive. And you're 100% rationally justified to go with it. Why? Because other than that, you'd be harmed. That's what your senses are there for. You see a lion running at you, you don't, look for evidence that it's really happening and your senses are functioning properly. You don't have time. You run. Or you die. You decide. Or you die. Or you get eaten. You decide. Both of them were asking me illogical questions. They were basically telling me I do not have the right to judge the evidence of my own senses because they've never had an experience that's akin to mine. Okay, that's the only thing they needed to acknowledge. And neither of them could do it. They both needed to be honest. But neither of you, if you're listening, did either of you see Seven Samurai? Probably not, right? Pine Creek, you probably didn't see it, right? Okay, how was it? You don't know. Period. You don't get to say, I saw a movie, this is what Pine Creek was trying to argue. That's why I used the movie analogy to begin with. That he's been in churches all his life, or, 15 years ago, he was in churches. Okay, it's not the same thing. I saw Seven Samurai. Does any movie count Pine Creek? No. Only one movie counts. At the Asbury Outpouring, that's only one place. And even if you go to that place and you don't experience God, that's not the end all be all. That doesn't mean God automatically doesn't exist, case closed. Why? Because there may be reasons other than, God's presence not being there for you rejecting it. It may be coming in a form that you're not used to processing. If you're an atheist, there's going to be resistance, period. Resistance, period. Round the board. The idea that you guys are non-resistant, non-believers, ludicrous. Ludicrous. There are some who are close. Okay, most atheists, no, you're not even close. You're not watching things to reinforce your non-belief morning, noon, and night, reality check, and somehow non-resistant to God if you were to show up. You're basically trying to prime the pump constantly to not believe. What the heck? What do you think you're doing? It's not a choice. It is a choice. You choose which videos to watch, and you know which videos are going to reinforce your non-belief. How is that not a choice? Hello? Can we be honest? How is that not a choice? Every single person listening to me could easily pick a video that's going to reinforce your non-belief, make you less likely to believe in God or more likely to believe in God. Atheists are going to choose 3 times out of 3 the one that's more likely to reinforce their non-belief. How is that not a choice? That's a choice. That's a choice. That's volitional. That's entirely up to you. And going to the Asbury Outpouring is entirely up to you. And you'd have to go, and you'd have to have the experience in a way that you could receive if there was something there to be received. Do you understand what I'm saying? My experience of Schindler's List was vastly different from my girlfriend's. Why? Because she had been emotionally, the ground had been prepared in her heart emotionally. That's not priming per se. Atheists say, priming. See, I told you priming. It's not priming per se. It's being able to receive something in the form in which it is there. Okay? And you need to do some background work in order for that to be the case. That's just how it is. That's just how it is. Right? Because that's how people are wired. We don't just interact with other cultures and other groups automatically. We have to do some work in order to, finesse the difference. That's just how we're wired. The metalhead and the classical musician had to already have experienced some commonality prior to them breaking bread. You understand what I mean? That's why I say, but the most important aspect of apologetic, what? Break bread, be cool, be reasonable. That's it. That's the most important. Step 1, establish rapport. Step 2, there is no step 2. Establish rapport. Why? Because that speaks volumes. And that speaks volumes louder in any way than any apologetic will ever reach. You break bread with something that you're establishing commonality. You're basically saying you and I are from the same tribe. And it's easy to do. Why? Because in a lot of ways we are. Dave Rollins and I are not faking liking Korean gangster movies. We both noticed it independent of each other. What? They're awesome. They're fun. They're really interesting and entertaining stuff. So we're of that, in that house, we're of the same tribe. We both like movies and we both like those type of cool, fun, interesting movies. There's a reason why I switched to Korean gangster movies, by the way. There's a logic to it. Why? Because Netflix has a lot of junk. There's a lot of like sci-fi movies that you click on and they're like so cheap and poorly made that you're like, God, this is a total waste of time. So you think they're going to be good and they're dismal. The Korean gangster movies are all high level. They're all real movies. They were at least a budget of like 20 million. So they're worth your time. That's the logic. There's real actors in Korea and I never heard of them, but they're all good and they're real movies. So they're good. That's why. Okay, I went the way of clicking on like, there's a couple of what are some of the ones on Netflix? Like there's a couple of movies like I Am Mother was a sci-fi movie, really pretty good actually, pretty good, definitely good, borderline great maybe, but sometimes the Netflix movie is good, right? Because it's quality movie. Other times there's something on there that they just put on in the sci-fi thing and it's just absolute dreck. It's like completely idiotic. It's like a high school video. There's a couple of them that I've watched like that, and I don't want to waste my time. So that's why I switched to Korean gangster movies. Why? Because they're all first run movies from Korea. They're all legitimate movies that went in the movie theater and cost 20 million to make. So they're high quality on that end at least. So they're not a total waste of time. Generally, action movies, it's really pretty easy for me to enjoy an action movie, to tell you God's honest truth, right? If it's a B-, I'm in. If it's a B-, I'm usually on board. The ones with Butler, Gerard Butler, I think his name is, like White House Down or something like that. I liked all those. So did my wife. We like to watch because they're fun. You're in the mood for just dopey action movies, shoots everything up. It's fine. It's a B+ or B, whatever. It's exactly what I was looking for. Well, I think there are 3 or 4 of them. Anyone know what I'm talking about? White House Down, Back at the White House, something like that. Angels. I don't forget. There's a series of them, and it's the same guy. That's why the Liam Neeson movies did so well. Why? Because they're pretty good. Missing and then or kidnapped or whatever. There's like 50 of them. I've watched almost all of them. They're decent. Most of them are good, to tell you the God's honest truth. If you're in the mood for a mindless action movie, they're right up your alley. So, anyways, does everyone understand? I think I made it all perfectly crystal clear as usual. But the point is, you cannot reject a quality experience without trying it, period. You have to try in order to know if it's going to produce the same effect in you. And generally speaking, you should count it as some evidence for the proposition God exists. Why? Because I am wired very similar to everybody else. Very similar. If everyone says a movie's funny, guess what? I usually find it funny too. If everyone likes something, I usually like it too. That's been true of music. That's been true of movies. I have some tastes that are more specific and esoteric than most people because I go exploring a little deeper. But other than that, I'm pretty easygoing. Pretty easy. When people go see something about Mary and everyone says it's hilarious, I find it hilarious. I'm pretty basic. Wired up pretty basic. So if I tell you something is there to be experienced and it seems to you the case that my senses function properly, and guess what? That's the case. Why? Am I making sense when I talk to you right now? Matt Dillahunty's argument was 100 times worse, by the way. He said to me, I said, because I have an experience of God, I put in the worship music, and it really honestly seems like God is present in the room with me. And he literally said to me, there's a guy in an insane asylum right now who thinks he's Napoleon. Okay. So I have to demonstrate to myself that I'm not crazy every single time I put on worship music and I have an experience that's shared by, 200 million people all over the globe. No, obviously not. Why would he say that? Because he has rejected the experience out of hand based on something he experienced 20 years ago. When's the last time he tried a religious experience? A long time ago. When's the last time Pine Creek Drug tried one? A long time ago. Pine Creek, when's the last time you tried a religious experience? I dare you to try a good one. Let me set the parameters for you. I dare you. Why? Because you'll know. And then you'll calm down. You go, wait a minute, there's something to this. You might not become a believer, but you'll understand immediately if I set the parameters. You'll understand immediately, dude. Immediately. If you let me set all the parameters and give you specific instructions, you might not become a believer, but you'll get it immediately. You'll go, I understand why this is so real and correct. Why? Because there's something here. Because there's something here. Never dragged anybody to the church that I go to in Thousand Oaks that hasn't happened. Never. And I drag all walks of life. Never have they not gotten something where they said, I get it. They didn't become believers necessarily, but they got it. They didn't go out of there, wow, Craig, you're an idiot. There's nothing to that at all. You're just dumb. You're deluded and crazy and weird. Never. That would never happen. They go into that experience, and that's why I drag them there. Why? Because I know it will register, and they get it. Okay, this might not be my thing, but I get why Craig Reed thinks this is real. Why? Because there's reality to it at least. At least in this form, there's something real to it. It's that simple. It's that simple. If I'm not crazy, and obviously I'm not crazy, and if I'm a rational actor, and I'm more of a rational actor than Aaron Ra, are you kidding me? Hello, have you compared the two of us? Hello, 100 times more rational than he is. Hello, am I lying? I've never ranted and raved at anybody on Twitter or YouTube. Never. Never. Okay, he's done it 15, 20 times. Broken down. More of a rational actor than Matt Dillon is. I think he's got a pretty intense temper. You know, he can be rational and reasonable sometimes, but I wouldn't say that's his calling card. It's not Shannon. Shannon's a rational actor. Shannon's reasonable. Okay, my point. If I seem to you like 100% reasonable of a human being and I tell you that my senses evidence the proposition God exists through a sense experience, I'm not saying that should make you a believer, but that should offer you some evidence. How much? Up to you. But it should be some. Why? Because I'm telling you the God's honest truth, guys. Do you care about the truth? Telling you the God's honest truth. That's why. Pine Creek, are you listening? I'm telling you the God's honest truth, Pine Creek. The God's honest truth. So you're doing something wrong. You are. You're bending over backwards to try and create unreality for your audience. That's what you did when you asked me questions. You bent over backwards to try and make me look stupid and lead me in a direction that was the least compelling, the least strong evidentiary. Basically tried to paint me in a corner and make me look like an idiot. That's what he does all the time. And then says he's not doing it. Insists he's not doing it. Yeah, okay, we're all stupid. Your audience is stupid, I'll give you that. But none of the rest of us are. None of the rest of it's what you do every single time. You try to paint someone in a corner. You even ask them questions, leading questions, so he can figure out what type of Christian they are, so he can paint them in a corner more effectively, make them look like an idiot. That's what he does every single time. Then when he traps them, he posts it on YouTube and goes, look, I trapped another theist. Oh, what an accomplishment. I can trap people like that in my sleep, dude. It's not an accomplishment at all. It's not an accomplishment at all. You're misrepresenting people and you are strawmanning times 1,000. Why? Because you are actually interviewing people so that you can find the weakest link in their worldview and they go exactly to that. It's like strawman times 1,000. Why is your audience allowed? Because they're not good critical thinkers. And they're a bunch of dopes. That's why. Honestly, you would expect atheists to get all over somebody for that. Why? Because they're supposed to be critical thinkers. They're supposed to call you out when you're doing things wrong. They never do. They never see it. Why? Because they're just like everybody else. Atheists, honestly, the Answers from Reason crew accepted. They're not. They're honest. But most atheists are just like everybody else. They believe what they want to believe and they go with, Aaron Ross said it, therefore it's true. They don't do any investigations. That's not true around the boards. Like I said, second most common type of atheist, honest actor. Danish debater, a guy like that who says check the receipts, he'll check the receipts. But a huge chunk of atheists are just as gullible, just as easily led as everybody else. They're just being led by different people. And they're just as indoctrinated as everybody else. Just because you chose the form of indoctrination doesn't mean it ain't indoctrination. Hello. If you watch Tucker Carlson and conservative politics every night, you're choosing a form of indoctrination, correct? Correct. It's no different if you watch Aaron Ra and T-Jump and Matt Dillahunty every single day. You are choosing a form of indoctrination. It's no different. It's no different. It's indoctrination. It's what you want to believe. Okay? The critical thinker challenges their deeply held presuppositions all the time. All the time. Not sometimes. All the time. So, anyways, enough with that rant. So, I think I covered most of the bases. I'll go back to it. Asbury Outpouring, is it the real deal? Hard to say from outside. And it's literally, you have to be there to know for real. And, even if it were the real deal, there are always going to be qualifiers. There are always reasons why a quality experience is going to appeal to some people and not others. And those reasons are culturally specific. Culturally specific. If you really want to make sure that you've covered all the bases and dotted every T and checked every I to make sure that you've really rejected something for the right reasons, you have to do a lot of work. You'd have to do a lot of work. You have to go to the religious experience in its strongest possible form and try to experience the strongest possible form of religious experience. And most of you haven't experienced any type of religious experience. You should start. Practice some meditation, practice lucid dreaming, practice Tai Chi, because then you'll at least have respect for spiritual experiences altogether. And that will just transform your whole attitude. That's what happened with John Vervaeke. John Vervaeke started out as an angry chip on his shoulder atheist, just like a lot of atheists. Okay, now he's basically a reasonable agnostic who sees deep value in religious experiences. Why? Because he's practiced a whole bunch of them. And he recognized that they produce things in him that he couldn't get through other sources. That's a fact. Did I stutter? No, that's a fact. They produce things inside of him. Most atheists just write this stuff off whole hog. They don't explore any of it. And when they do explore it, they don't explore it honestly. They go to the weakest forms to try and debunk it. Debunk, dismiss, discredit. That's the only agenda they have. Okay, that's not an honest agenda. It's not even close. It's not. It's not even close. Am I stuttering? No. That's why I always say accept the Answers from Reason crew. They're not the only ones. There's a contingency of atheists who do this correctly and honestly. 30%, just the second most common type of atheist, but the majority of the atheists don't. They do it in a way that guarantees produce non-belief. And that doesn't mean that's because there's no God. It means because you're literally trying to produce non-belief, literally bending over backwards to make sure that you encounter things that it will reinforce your non-belief. And you're doing it on purpose. And that's a fact. That's a fact. What I just said is a fact. I promise. Anyways, all right, that's enough. Enough ranting. That's enough ranting for one day. Productive, I think. So, that is all for now, kids. Like I said, I'll probably do 1 or 2 more videos on the Asbury Outpouring. It's not just atheists who will reject it. Christians are busy debating it because it doesn't come in a form that some Christians are willing to sign on to. That's really what it's all about. That's not what a certain type of Christian thinks of as a religious experience. So they won't buy into it, period. Even if God is present there, they won't accept it. That's a lot of what goes on. A lot of this stuff is cultural. And cultural is all almost entirely predicated on your presuppositions, on your paradigm of reality, on what type of person you are, not what is true versus what is false. Is what type of person you are, meaning what can you actually receive and lay hold of versus another type of person. The metalhead and the classical musician. Okay, when the metalhead says Van Halen is a great rock act, he is correct. If you do not believe me, listen, Ain't Talking About Love. Killer guitar solo in that piece, in that work. There's a killer guitar solo. Ain't talking about It's a killer song with a killer guitar solo. And then when a classically trained musician tells you Beethoven's Ninth is his masterpiece, he is also correct. They are both correct. Both things can be true at the exact same time. And they don't cancel each other out. They're not making wildly disparate claims. They can't all be right, but they can all be wrong, Craig. Either Van Halen is right or Beethoven's wrong. That's basically the argument against they can't all be right, but they can all be wrong. It's basically what people are arguing. They don't cancel each other out. They can both be right. And in fact, they both are. Go listen to both. You don't believe me. Go listen to Ain't Talking About Love, that specific Van Halen song. Remember, qualia is content specific. And then go listen to Beethoven's Ninth Second Movement. Masterpieces on both ends, if you ask me. Maybe is Van Halen's Ain't Talking About Love a masterpiece? Okay, go listen to Jimi Hendrix All Along the Watchtower. Masterpiece of guitar work. Masterpiece. Some of the best guitar work you will ever hear in your life. And then listen to Beethoven's Ninth Second Movement. They can both be great. But qualia is content specific. There are people in a classical, playing the violin right now in a classical whatever, who can't listen to Jimi Hendrix. Why? Because it's not what they consider music. Correct? Correct. There are Christians right now who can never go to the Asbury Outpouring. Why? Because it's not what they consider religion. It's not what they consider a move of God, even if it is. Why? Because they just won't accept it in that form. It's that simple. If you're an atheist, you do not have the luxury to be like that. Why? Because you're supposed to make evidence-based conclusions and evidence-based conclusions alone. You're supposed to be dealing with just facts, just reality. So you don't have the luxury to do that. You have to recognize that in yourself. Why? Because you said you're a critical thinker, then I'm going to hold you to that standard of accountability. If you say you're a critical thinker, then I'm going to tell you what a critical thinker would do. Hello? Critical thinker would recognize that deficiency in themselves and correct for it. They wouldn't just go with it. With critical thinker, if you ask them who's right, Democrats or Republicans, they would recognize their own biases and try to weigh the facts of any particular policy and not go with their emotional responses. Do you understand? Okay. There you go. There you have it, kids. That's all for now. The Mass has ended. Go in peace. Amen.